Thank you so much for joining us right here on Good Morning Kenya. My name is Samuel Njoroge, and of course, you can feel free to interact with us on Twitter at Asami1Njoroge. You can also find me on SMS 20511. That's the SMS line, begin with the initials GMK. The United Nations Environmental Assembly just came to a close right here in Nairobi, and of course, an array of issues were discussed right here in Kenya. We are having a problem with wildlife trafficking, poaching. Talk about it. It's disturbing us right here in Kenya. And of course, we've had our international partners work with us, talk to us, and also try and help us on how we can overcome this. And from the European Union, we've got the European Union Commissioner for Environment and Maritime Affairs and Fisheries. His name is Kamenu Vela, who has been on that particular docket from the year 2014 to the present. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much, Samuel.
Just a quick one, Mr. Vela. Why has the EU developed an action plan against wildlife trafficking?
First of all, before I start, I have to congratulate the Kenyan government for its efforts and results that it's getting as well. As soon as we landed, we were taken from the airport because we asked to go and see the Kenya National Park. First of all, I have to say that we were positively impressed both at the beauty of the park and at the commitment of the Kenyan people and the Kenyan government towards this park. And even though poaching is on the increase, I think that the measures that the Kenyan government has taken have managed to decrease the poaching. So that when we see these results, it gives us a lot more of encouragement that we continue supporting the Kenyan government. Why are we doing this? First of all, poaching and illegal wildlife trafficking is not an issue only here in Kenya. It's a global issue. We think that this criminal activity is linked to other criminal activities. We're talking about wildlife trafficking, drug trafficking, arms trafficking, human trafficking. So we have to look at the bigger picture. We also think that illegal wildlife trafficking is threatening three things. It's threatening nature, the environment, biodiversity. It's also threatening the livelihood of the people, so threatening the livelihood of the locals, and it's also threatening the economy of the country. So with this perspective, we feel that we have to support in the international and the global fight against wildlife trafficking.
And of course, Europe has provided more than 500 million euro for wildlife conservation in Africa over the past 30 years. If we were to do a quick audit on this, has it yielded the fruit desired?
I'm going to be honest. I personally feel that perhaps if we work a little bit harder with the same amount of funds that you mentioned, perhaps the output could have been better. That's my thinking on the one hand. On the other hand, we all feel that this is something which we have recently embarked on. This is a test period, a pilot period where Kenya and other African countries are working together with the EU. So there is a learning curve. So that is the learning curve. You mentioned 500 million euros. Actually, for the whole of Africa, during the last few years, the European Union invested, I won't say spent, because this is an investment, invested some 700 million on conservation of wildlife, part of which is fighting illegal. That's for Africa. Obviously, Kenya is benefiting from that amount. But apart from that, we're continuously supporting what African countries are doing. For example, when we went to the park, obviously one of the most impressive things that we saw is the mountain of burnt ivory, which your president decided. And I think that that was a very, very strong message. It was a courageous decision which I think sent a very strong message. So apart from, because funds are important, but funds are not everything. Plus, and together with the funds, I think the countries have got to have the commitment and the full will to fight this criminal activity.
The lessons exchanged from this particular, fight so far?
I think, as I said, the commitment has got to be there, and the commitment has got to come top down and bottom up. When you see the commitment coming straight from the head of the country, from the president himself, I think that says a lot. And that for me is something that we have to carry with each and every country with whom we are cooperating. I said top down because when we talk even to the people, the locals, everyone is now more appreciative, everyone is more caring, with a protective attitude towards nature, wildlife. We have to understand that today the assets of a country, the assets of a nation, is not just the money that that country has in its central bank or the gold reserves that it has in the central bank. The gold reserves and money in a bank don't attract tourists, but the assets are the wildlife, the nature, the biodiversity of that country. So when we are protecting the wildlife, the biodiversity and nature, we are protecting the future of our children, of our grandchildren.
Right.
So we are working now, probably we won't see the full results of all our efforts, but thank God those results will be enjoyed by future generations.
By future generations. Trafficking a concern for the EU?
It is a big concern because, as I said, we on the one hand are trying to support countries like Kenya and together with Kenya other African countries. So we are funding projects, we are putting in investments, we are putting in money. At the same time, wildlife trafficking is threatening our investment in those countries, because when we say that wildlife is threatening the economy of countries, when at the same time we are trying to pump up and to support the economy, so that's threatening even our efforts. Plus the fact that, as I said, we also see the links of this criminal activity with other links, with other criminal links elsewhere. Plus, we are committed because we're talking about illegal wildlife trafficking in Africa, in Kenya, but let us not forget that there are source countries, there are transit countries, and there are market countries. And in that respect, even the European Union is affected directly. Okay, I won't say that the European Union is as big a market as some other countries, perhaps in Asia, but it is a transit country. We do have species which are illegally being shipped out of Europe, yeah, like glass eels and so on. So it is also affecting us. Whatever policies we have in Europe which are good for us, we try to promote them elsewhere, whether they are economic policies like the circular economy. If it's good for us, it's good for other countries, and our commitments are as as strong outside the European Union as they are as strong inside the European Union. Because this criminal activity is getting stronger, it's getting bigger, the demands are there, the technology is helping us as much as it is helping the criminals, and we are still taking this at higher level. Just to give you one example, one of the things that we have managed to push now in our wildlife action plan is that all our member states will have to treat illegal wild trafficking as a criminal offense. So that is saying something, and that is when we talk about the European Union, we're talking about the whole 28 of our member states. That's just to give you one example. The other thing is that I think there has to be more collaboration, cooperation between different departments. When we came up with our action plan, and I can explain briefly what we're doing with this action plan, it wasn't just the Commissioner me for the environment which came up with this action plan. It was the concerted effort of myself, the Commissioner for the External Affairs, the Commissioner in charge of Security, the Commissioner in charge of Customs. So it was a concerted effort. And likewise, we have to do the same in each and every country that with whom we cooperate. I mentioned our action plan. Basically, in this action plan, what we've committed ourselves to do is, first of all, to engage more with the locals. Secondly, to curb or totally eradicate the demand and the source and the market. And thirdly, that we have to fight with all our means the corruption aspect of this illegal activity. And fourthly, to encourage the increase of the enforcement tools, not just in Europe, but also outside Europe.
Mm-hmm. What inspired the Larger Than Elephants initiative?
Yes, that initiative came from a colleague of mine who is in charge of DEFCO. And it's a good initiative because it is also helping, not just because now we're talking about illegal trafficking, but we're also talking about conservation and protecting wildlife. Why? Today in most countries, protecting wildlife costs money. That money is coming from Europe, from other areas, but there has to come a day when wildlife and this protection will be a revenue for the country. Why? Because protecting wildlife in parks and organizing and managing these parks better, that could be a self-sustaining economic activity, especially where tourism is concerned. So Larger than elephants is something that we are doing for Africa, again, through funding, through discussing, through cooperating, and through exchanging of best practices as well.
Mm-hmm. And what support is the EU giving Kenya specifically Kenya, when it comes to wildlife trafficking and even poaching?
Yes, I think, as I mentioned, we have invested some 700 million for Africa, and Kenya is benefiting from that amount. Over and above that, we are constantly in contact to cooperate on wildlife protection programs. I also had a discussion with Richard Leakey when we visited the park, and there might be some future cooperation as well.
Right.
We've opened the door that we should keep in touch to see how better we can cooperate.
Mm-hmm. The United Nations Environmental Assembly just came to a close. As far as wildlife trafficking is concerned, Mr. Vela, what are those issues discussed during that conference that can actually give a bit of hope to the situation?
Yes, we made a proposal about this, which was positively accepted. Obviously, then we have to start working on the details of this proposal. I think overall there is a general consensus that wildlife has to be protected, sustainably managed, and looked after for future generations, as I said. This is something that it's not just a question, an issue in Kenya or in Africa, but it's as I said, it's a global issue. Again, protecting and sustainably managing wildlife.
To ensure sustainability of the implementation of the EU action plan, what have you got in place?
we have to work with other countries on this. Why? Because when I mentioned source, transit and market countries, mostly Africa is regarded as the main source, Europe is not the main but one of the transit countries, and Asia probably one of the biggest market countries. So when it comes to Africa, we're talking mostly about Africa as a source. So we have to make certain that the focus is to make certain that poachers, illegal traffickers are controlled. We know that there is a good methodology here, rangers, which I'm sorry to say at times they are even risking their life. But as I said in one of the meetings when I was discussing wildlife trafficking, we often talk about rangers on the ground. But I think each and every citizen should be a ranger in his own right. Okay, not in the park, not on the ground, but there are other ways, other means of supporting, even through awareness of supporting wildlife. So you, me, we all have to be rangers in our own role.
Exactly. And even as we embrace this fight and continue to soldier on, what are some of the key issues that we should not turn a blind eye to?
Key issues. Again, that is something that I have discussed with your Minister for the Environment. And one of the things that I have asked and that I wanted to discuss is what are the key issues on the ground? Why? Because we have our own perception of what the issues might be. But those people who are on the ground might have different issues. And in fact, this is what happened. The first issue that the minister explained to me, she said, yes, poaching is a very big issue, but poaching is not our main issue. Our main issue is space. Our park space, the space for wildlife, is being encroached on by urban sprawl, by urban development. And so this is something that I myself has never thought that this would be a bigger issue than poaching itself. Then we discussed other issues like the need for more equipment, for more tools and so on. Funding, obviously.
Absolutely. What are the immediate, middle and long-term benefits envisioned by the EU in this initiative?
As I said, it is the link between our policies, our internal policies, the link with the external policies. Not when I talk about the external policies, we're not trying to impose European policies on African countries, no, but we have to make certain that our policies and the policies of African countries or other countries with whom we are cooperating converge, and that any funding, obviously any funding which we are gladly giving to African countries obviously are used so that the results, the output converge with our objectives.
If you look at the situation, you did rightfully say that you've had a discussion with our Cabinet Secretary on this very issue. Where should we look at keenly?
I can talk about what we can do
Yes.
with regards to our loopholes, because obviously I'm sure that your minister, your government has given enough proof that the loopholes are being closed and enforcement has been improved and the results are forthcoming and poaching is decreasing. But again, when it comes to our loopholes, I think we have to close in on the criminal, not just one criminal activity, but we have to look at the broader aspect of this criminal activity, which includes, amongst other things, illegal wildlife trafficking.
Right. It's something that came up as I was going through your bio, sir.
Yeah.
From 1976 to 2014, you're a member of the Maltese Parliament.
Yes.
How did that prepare you for the position that you're currently holding?
I've had a very mixed experience because 38 years in parliament doesn't mean 38 years in government. I've had my time in government and I've had my time in opposition. Whenever I was in government, I had the opportunity to be 4 times minister. The first time I was minister for public works and infrastructure. The second time I was minister for industry, and then twice minister for tourism and aviation. Whenever I was in opposition, I was always with the private sector. Especially, I was chairing an international hotel management company, so tourism is something. And whether it's tourism or I have always learned that without good environment, without a healthy environment, tourism especially is a non-starter. And I think that is helping me a lot in my portfolio now. What is helping me in my portfolio now as well is that I come from a very small island. I come from Malta, right in the center of the Mediterranean, where we have a very small land area, but we have a bigger EEZ. We have an economy which totally, almost depends a lot on the seas around us, and that has perhaps an inbuilt effect in me because I have put the oceans and seas as one of my priorities during my mandate, and I am working a lot on the blue growth, the blue economy, ocean governance, and so on. And basically my line is always, let's look at the opportunities in the oceans, but let us not forget about our environmental responsibilities in the oceans as well.
Since 2014, you have been the European Union Commissioner for Environment, Maritime Affairs and Fisheries. How is the experience so far?
It's a great responsibility because what we are discussing is not only going to affect the 500 million citizens in the European Union, but most of the decisions we take have a global effect. Today, we have global issues. Today, the issues we discuss are not issues particular to the European Union. If we take the environment, if we take the oceans, you cannot say today we have an environmental issue only in the EU, the environment in China, in Russia, the environment in the US. No, we have one global environment, we need global solutions, and over and above all, we need global actions. So my experience is that, yes, I am a commissioner for the European Union, but I think our major effort should be that I have to work with other governments, with other countries to resolve and to improve on the global situation altogether.
Thank you so much. I wish you all the best in both your present and future endeavors.
Thank you very much.
Kindly pass our regards to the Maltese nationals.
Thank you, and I hope
Right.
this is not my last visit.
No, we hope so too. And when you're back, kindly pay us a visit. Well, we've come to a close of that particular talk with Mr. Kamenu Vella, who is the EU Commissioner for Environment, Maritime Affairs and Fisheries. Of key note is that the European Union has set aside over 700 million euro to be used to fight wildlife trafficking in Africa between the years 2014 and 2020. Well, we right here at KBC Channel 1, we shall make sure that we take audit of how well that is going, as well as the UNEP conference has come to an end. What are the binding issues that has been, what are the binding commitments that can help us overcome wildlife trafficking in this part of the Sahara? Well, we do hope that you've gained a lesson or two as far as all that and much more is concerned. My name is Samuel Njoroge. Thank you for watching. This is Good Morning Kenya, the only way to start your day.